Welcome to Safe Doesn't Scale. I'm your host, David Walsh, founder of Limelight. This show is for marketing and growth leaders with a chip on their shoulder who are tired of playing it safe. I'm so excited today. I've got Shoaib on the pod. Shoaib and I have worked together for a while now, and he is an expert at all things LinkedIn growth. Shoaib is now a fractional head of content at Limelight, and I'm excited to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to chat with you about all stuff LinkedIn, B2B, influence, and content.
Where do we want to start? I feel like you've been part of the journey from the early days. If you think back to two and a bit years ago now, right? I reached out to you. I found your profile on LinkedIn and I said, this guy's an expert. And I was interviewing B2B influencers at the time. And I remember the call that we had. I came out of that being like, this guy knows his shit. So we ended up getting to work together. I feel like let's start with content in B2B. You know, you're an expert at this. You do founder-led brand. You do content for a lot of executives. Talk to me a little bit about why you think content is really important, specifically in B2B and on LinkedIn.
Definitely. I mean, in B2B especially, and especially with a lot of the clients that I work with, they're experts in their field. They might have been doing their thing for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And they walk into a room and people know them. But that room might have 50, 60, 70 people. If you take their expertise, their knowledge, their subject matter specialisms, put them online, you have unlimited reach and potential to grow revenue in a way that you just can't do in a small, surrounded by four walls. So when I first started working with a few clients, I picked their brain, learned how they think, and then created content that is the type of stuff that they'd walk on a stage and comfortably say. But for some reason, there was a barrier between just posting online. And the biggest thing that I've seen is the influence that you can build. Most people think you post on LinkedIn when you need a client or when you want to get something. But what I've really noticed is if you post consistently and build brand over time, it opens doors that previously you didn't even really recognize as existing. And so the potential of opportunity is just like unlimited. It's crazy.
I've honestly got such a great story that honestly happened last week. So I was at SaaStock in Austin, and guess who I bumped into? Adam Robinson. I was speaking at the conference. He was speaking at the conference, and I just got like this a moment of like, I have to go and say hello. So I went up to him, said hello, and I was like, I've been following your journey forever. For those that don't know that are listening in, Adam's one of the biggest LinkedIn influencers and founder-led content execs. I followed his content for a long time. Anyway, I hard sold him on Limelight. Don't know why. It just started verbally vomiting on him, and his response was, "That's super interesting," but he was actually about to go up on stage and do a keynote. So I reckon I was just distracting him, which was kind of funny. But it's one of those examples, though, Shoaib, of like I felt like I knew him. Right. I felt like I met him in person. I felt like I know this guy. He has no idea who I am, but I know him. Right. And I think that's the power of content. So, you know, a good example of, you know, meeting one of your LinkedIn heroes. So LinkedIn has changed a lot. We're going to talk about that. But I also think a lot of creators, they come in different shapes and sizes, right? We do influencer marketing for B2B. We work with a lot of big name brands, but we also help them find influencers. And what I didn't realize when I started out, Shoaib, is that there's people that create content for everything. So talk to us a little bit about the different styles of content that you see and the different types of creators that you know personally, because I know you know hundreds of them.
Yeah, I mean, the range is like crazy. I mean, as long as you have something to sell, you can create a brand off the back of it, especially on LinkedIn. And I think we can also chat later about why LinkedIn specifically is just like growing at record rates right now in this kind of like marketing climate. But what I've really noticed is the best creators are ones who just bring their full authentic self online. And so for so long, people have steered away from that on LinkedIn because it's like a corporate, like it's seen as a corporate kind of robotic platform with a particular style of writing. And I think I actually credit Gen Z for this, for really bringing like an authenticity to LinkedIn that now a lot of executives who are like 20, 30 years older are looking at a 22-year-old who's built a brand and now a 6-7 figure business off their content and thinking, been in business 20, 30 years and we're not getting anywhere near the reach or impact that these guys are getting. So anyone can become a content creator. I worked with people who are like coaches, ADHD coaches, business coaches, M&A experts, all the way to people who like supply chain. I've worked with an 80-year-old, no, not 80, 76-year-old accountant. I helped him build his brand. And at the same time, it was funny actually, on that day, I also had a call with an 18-year-old who had just started a business, was still at university. And so I went out of it with a 76-year-old accountant who'd been in the industry for 50 years and then jumped on a call with someone who's just starting out. And I think that is like a really good like visual to show you the range of opportunity here. It doesn't really discriminate on age, gender, industry. I've worked in supply chain, HR, recruitment, tech, marketing, sales, e-com.
I
So
love
it's,
what you said, just to, sorry to cut you off, but I love what you said about Gen Z changing the platform. Like, it's such an interesting thing. When we think about B2B marketing, right? For a long time, the people that you're selling to are an older generation, right? The people that are decision makers are typically an older generation. They're used to the same traditional type of marketing, right? They get influenced by a digital ad, they get told at a conference about this product, but people are learning about products in a completely different way, right? They're learning about an LMs that they're chatting to and newsletters that they're reading and podcasts they're listening to, like this one. And so marketeers need to go more up market with their marketing to be part of the awareness stage, right? But it's so challenging when you think about trying to get a corporation to speak like a human. And I think this level of marketing, this type of marketing, I always thought that it was just necessary. What you're saying is it's actually the audience that you're going after. It's what they want to hear. It's what they want. It's they want to be influenced by a person and they want to see that person. And so I think we're all in the same boat, which is content led marketing is the future and personality led marketing is the future. Talk to us a little bit about how LinkedIn has changed, because I know people listening to this are going to be really interested, for better or for worse, right? There's pros and cons to this. What are you seeing change? What have you seen over the last, let's call it 12 months or even 6 months on the platform? Because I know a lot has shifted.
yeah, massively actually. I still think LinkedIn hasn't hit its peak in terms of like your ability to grow on the platform as an individual and build brand. But I think it's getting close to that point. 2, 3 years ago, you could post pretty mediocre content and get a high number of eyeballs on whatever you were saying. And you could go viral pretty easily because there were so few people in the grand scheme of LinkedIn users, so few people posting. Whereas now news feeds are more saturated. The barrier to entry has lowered because of AI. And with that comes a lot of AI slop, but also it makes content more accessible. You no longer really have to be a trained copywriter to build an okay brand. To build an exceptional brand, you need to understand copywriting at another level. So I think it's easy to enter the market. It's harder to differentiate yourself now more than ever, and also harder to actually get results off the platform. Because writing a single LinkedIn post and that goes viral, that's great. But then if you want to turn that into something, into real leverage, that is going to not only build visibility, but also generate inbound opportunity or build trust with your ICP or help you diversify your income or, sell out a launch. That requires more. It requires like a deep level of trust and credibility. And the only way to build that is through brand over time. So you need to have, I guess, patience is something I talk about hugely when it comes to content. Like people see people go viral one day and think, I'd love that. They don't love the amount of work or input that requires.
I think that could be said for everything, right? It's
Yeah.
like everyone wants the output, the end result. They see somebody with 100,000 followers who've grown a successful audience and business behind it, and they want that, right? But then you actually say, here's what went into that. It's 2 or 3 years of learning the craft, of understanding how to create content and of doing it and showing up consistently. And I feel like a lot of people want that, but then when they actually execute on it, it's just so hard to stay on top of it. But the truth is, you become very passionate about it. Like, I didn't realize when I started creating content 2 years ago, you just end up learning from other people, right? You look at their content, you see how they're writing, and then you're able to think through what does code content look like. And at the same time, like, everything becomes a story, right? Like, and that's where I'd love to take us, right? Is you help, people create content and you help coaches coach others to create content. I feel like one of the objectives I get is like, what do I talk about? Like, that's not really for LinkedIn. You tell us a little bit about how you approach those sort of objections and how you think about how any type of business interaction could potentially be a LinkedIn post.
Yeah, for sure. I think just before I answer that question, I need to give some context to this. So in the past, you could post kind of something that happened in your business after the fact of it happening, right? And that was kind of the typical path people would take, right? So you've hit this milestone in business, you write a post about it. You've hired this person, write a post about it. Whereas now I think a lot of founders, especially younger founders, are working like backwards. They're building brand, building community, building leverage, building excitement around something that they're doing, even if it hasn't fully launched yet, so that by the time it launches, they have that audience there. They have interest. They have eyeballs on the landing page. They have thousands of people in a mailing list. So LinkedIn really is like the vehicle. I'd say it sits at the top of your marketing funnel, but it's integrated within your wider content ecosystem. And that's a huge shift. I think you asked before about shifts on LinkedIn. I think we've gone from LinkedIn as a primary marketing channel to LinkedIn as one core component of your wider content ecosystem. So within that, we're thinking about lead magnets, virtual events, in-person events, community groups, podcasts, newsletters, etc. Is the best way, in my opinion, right now in B2B to drive traffic to all those places.
I think what you just said is so important for people listening to this, which is it is not about the polished, you know, product launch posts or, the end result of the perfect social media, you know, here's what we've built, go use it. If you're marketing and you're only doing marketing at that stage, you've missed a massive opportunity. That's like the iceberg analogy, right? Where you can only see the top of the iceberg. Most people think about the content as the top of the iceberg. What you're saying is like, it's actually the stories of the build and process and the learnings. And what you're seeing now on LinkedIn is actually like sharing those ongoing learnings that aren't polished is the content that performs the best. Probably because AI can't just write that, right? Like it's actually you doing it and you learning it and then sharing those learnings. So I wonder if that resonates with you.
Yeah, 100%. I actually just wrote an email about that exact thing. It's when you have an idea or a message or some type of value that you want to share, it's no longer good enough to just write that bit of value because AI can do that. Anybody could do that. I think what's way more powerful is if you anchor your messaging in a specific experience, a particular case study, or a story, like you said. And that is the thing that helps win trust. Because if you post about something after the fact, great, you get a round of applause. People say congratulations as a comment. But if they've seen that in real time happen over the course of 3 months, where you've spoken about the journey of what that looked like day to day, how they did it, why they did it, you're not just looking at an educator, you're actually looking at a practitioner. I think that's another massive difference right now on LinkedIn. Anybody can educate because they can prompt AI, Claude, for example, really well and give you a 5-step listicle or here's how to do this. But what AI currently won't do is prove that person's done that through a real life case study or story that brings it to life. And that is the differentiator right now. Like, no longer should you be serving value, you should be actually serving experience, expertise to make your content believable. That's really important.
I love the way you said, when you said AI, you said currently can't do that, right? Because at the speed of rapid iteration, I'm
Yeah.
like, what else is going to get taken over?
Yeah.
I want to come back to something you said as well, and just point something out for the audience, which is when I first met you, and I was like, I need to learn LinkedIn. Like, I'm going all in on LinkedIn. I'm building this influencer marketplace. I have chatted with 100 influencers on B2B in B2B, and I need to learn LinkedIn. You were the person that was pushing me to be more authentic, to tell the stories that are not the big wins, they're the big losses, right? And it takes a mindset of like, I'm willing to put myself out there to the level of I'm willing to tell you all of the failures. And that is really difficult for people to grasp who have never created content. And what I've found, Shoaib, is that you build sort of a muscle, right? You care deeply in the first 3 months about the cringiness of the post that you've posted about because you're telling a story about a loss and something that isn't a win. And what you realize is over time, that muscle becomes something you just care less about and you realize it's really great content. The question I have is when people are thinking about content, how do you get them to step out of their comfort zone? Let's just, yeah, take that question whichever way you want.
Yeah. So I mean, for a lot of people, I guess even before that, there's a stage that I run through, which is I run like an informal interview with that person. It really is just a chat. We just chat about them, their story. And in the course of maybe those 90 minutes, I get a real good sense of A, what they're really comfortable and confident speaking about, and B, the things that they kind of glaze over or don't go into much detail of. Also, I figure out what they find interesting. So they immediately become like the key talking points. But I think when you first start, naturally, you like most people, we need to see proof of the thing working. So I would suggest personally, if you have like a story to tell, but you don't know how to share it, or you're worried that it might come across this way, or what if my ICP sees it and how could this affect my clients, for example, I would at that point suggest working with somebody, even if it's just for a 1 hour session, to help you understand how to tell that story in a way that doesn't harm your personal brand, because that does happen as well. Like we've seen it on LinkedIn where people think, oh, I need to be authentic, I need to be vulnerable, and they overshare in a way that just becomes self-indulgent. You have to think, okay, at what point in this post am I giving something to the reader? And value for the reader comes in many different forms. It doesn't just have to be educational. It can be entertainment, it can be humor, it can be empowerment, it can be inspiration, it can be somebody reading your post and feeling good about it afterwards. So I think about that, not what do I have to share. It's more like, what can I give somebody else that is going to actually make them feel better, more hopeful, more empowered, more motivated, and flip it. Because I think a lot of the time we're so in our own heads, but realistically, somebody's going to see your post and the next day they're not really going to think about it. Um, uh,
That's such a good line, which is like nobody really gives a shit. Like in the end, like you assume, oh, if I put this out there, everyone's going to care, and the reality is nobody gives a shit. Like they just move on. They want to be educated. They got short time, spans, and they're willing to give your attention for a little bit. And you have to earn that attention. And then you have to give them value and make sure that they're going to come back and want to read your content from there on out. I want to come back to how you use AI with copywriting, because like so many people are interested in this, and you can do it so wrong so fast. So let's kind of dive into that in a moment. Brand partnerships on LinkedIn.
mhm.
You were one of those people who I reached out at the beginning and were kind of explaining to me, no, it doesn't really exist. And then it's starting to happen. And now it's happening more frequently. And I'll give you statistics. I reached out to maybe 200 influencers at the start. And I would say the biggest ones, let's say 100 of them, 80, 90% of them said, I don't do any brand partnerships on LinkedIn. And I said, why? And they said, because it dings our brand. It takes away from the personal brand. People won't trust me, right? And I did an analysis 2 years after, and I looked at all those people who had said no. And the funniest thing, well, my bet that I made was that they would do brand partnerships
Yeah.
if it was more accepted. And so now, instead of it being 10 or 20% of them doing, partnerships, it was 80 or 90% of them had been paid through the Limelight platform, which made me feel so excited because I was trying to convince them that this is okay to do and this is something that they should do. And then over time, the industry I started to accept it. So you're a creator, right? I don't know how many followers you have now, 60 plus, maybe 70 plus thousand followers, and you've done a few brand partnerships. What are you seeing in the industry with your other creator friends, and why are they open to doing more brand partnerships? Is that a shift that has happened over time?
Yeah, a huge shift. I think. I mean, there's a number of things here. I think creators have just become more confident on LinkedIn as a platform because it was a huge minority like 2, 3 years ago, and visibility is really important. And I think as soon as you see one or two other creators land brand partnerships, you suddenly realize, oh, actually, I've spent years creating content, delivering masterclasses, creating digital products for free. By the way, like creators spend thousands and thousands of hours doing free labor. That's what it is, right? And with LinkedIn, it's so weird. There's a kind of like snobbery about it, which doesn't appear on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram. Like on there, everybody's aware and fully accepts creators monetizing their communities and audience, right? I think it's just a case of how do you do it? So
Mm.
if you're building a audience in a particular field, say AI, for example, it fully makes sense for you to talk about AI products or AI tools in a way that is honest and reflective, but also aligns with like your values and the values of your audience. And something interesting I've seen is in the last kind of year and a half, there's been a huge number of creators DM me personally and being like, oh, you worked with this brand, they've reached out to me, Can we just talk about pricing? And I love that
Mm.
so much, because in the past you'd be so scared to speak openly about like brand deals, pricing, contracts. Whereas now I think creators realize like transparency is ultimately the best thing between creators. And because it's like this informal network's been created that is probably invisible to most people, but most creators know most creators. And so those conversations that are happening, and I think that's creating leverage for creators and brands, and then realizing, oh, actually, this is a really high ROI marketing channel for us. Like, we need to treat creators with the respect that they deserve. And equally, we're going to get the best out of them when we compensate them properly.
Let me ask you a different angle here, which is when does it go wrong, right? When is it, when, what should you not do and when does it go wrong? And then let's come to AI tools for copywriting.
Yeah. So I've seen loads of examples like this. But if somebody's talking about something consecutively and very anti it, and like 2 weeks later they are promoting a product in that way, or when they've promoted a particular product and then 2 weeks later promote the competitor, I think it's really harmful to like long-term brand. You can spend 2-3 years building a brand and kind of kill it within a week if you are just seen to quick cash grabs. It's really, really obvious. The best things that I've seen is when creators work with brands on long-term campaigns. Doing like 10 one-off campaigns within a month is just going to really dilute everything about your brand, and also lose your credibility and make people trust you less. I've seen it most effective when a brand says, look, these creators fit really nicely in our niche. Their audiences could be the perfect ICP of our product. Why don't we work with them, not just on one post, but over the course of 3 to 6 months across maybe their newsletter, their live events, LinkedIn posts? And that is the way when that's the way to get your audience not only to really respect the creator, but also think, oh, actually,
Mm.
this is really going to align.
And what you said is like three separate things, which is one, don't promote
Yeah.
competitors, products one week and then do a competitor the next week. The other one is don't post too many brand partnerships. Like don't do 5 a week, right? Like that
Yeah.
seems like it's too much and too much saturation. And then the third one is, I think like what I would say, Shoaib, is it's more about authenticity,
Mm,
right? Like actually have a problem that this product solves
yeah.
that your audience cares about. If there's a mismatch there, which can happen sometimes, right? Somebody says, I want to give you $2,500 to post on LinkedIn. Here's the post, and here's what we're thinking. Can you write some words that replicate this in your own voice? And they do it without fully understanding what the product does and what the problem that it solves. And they kind of just do it in a rush, right? You need to feel, it needs to feel authentic. And again, like any copywriting, you got to think about who your audience is. Like, who is your audience and what are you trying to solve for? And is this a product that they should be aware of? And if it is, and there's a perfect creator and brand match, our problem and solution, it is really powerful. And then I also think like longer term partnerships is something that you should always consider, right? Like instead of just doing one post. AI for copywriting, let's get into it. How do you use AI? People ask me this all the time. If you look to LinkedIn and just scroll a few posts, you're going to see AI, right? So how should you use it? Because you would be, and I'm for want of a better word, very stupid not to be using AI the right way,
Mhm.
speed up the efficiencies and the inspiration. So, talk us through how you use AI today and what you suggest other creators who are maybe earlier in the journey, how they should use AI, and then maybe what's not to do.
Mhm. Yeah. So, I mean, let's start with the what not to do. What not to do is plug in a very generic prompt into something like ChatGPT, get a post, copy and paste it onto LinkedIn, and then create 30 posts for the entire month in one day and think you've been productive and done a great job, because that's not going to achieve anything. What I would do is think, okay, what is my goal with this current content campaign? Because I like to work in campaigns rather than one-off posts, right? You can be a bit more strategic that way. You can think, okay, by the end of this month, I want to get X amount of clients signed onto this program, or by X amount of time, I need 200 new subscribers to my mailing list, right? Give yourself a window in the diary to work with. So it might be 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Create your own marketing campaign for your LinkedIn content. Step one is the timeline. Step two is set the objective. What metric are you using to test that? Step three is then to decide, how am I going to get there? So how am I going to get people to buy this thing, join this mailing list, whatever? You need a mix of brand awareness content at the top, which is your top of funnel, which is deep storytelling, the type of post that's going to blow up traffic to your profile. In the middle of the funnel, what you want is thought leadership content that is anchored in real experiences and stories and case studies, and that actually gives perspective. That's really important. Your POV and your TOV. So, what is your unique point of view, and how are you differentiating yourself from every other competitor in terms of how you approach that topic? And then your TOV is like, write like you speak, use like the dialect, slang, capitalization, emojis, even like sarcasm, humor, wit, all of those things differentiate your brand. And then obviously the bottom of that funnel is the kind of direct sales types of posts, but doing those in interesting ways. So instead of just saying, I'm launching this offer, like talk about somebody who's gone through that journey in real time. So you bring your stories to life through characters. That's really
Mm.
important. You are the character. You can have heroes and villains. Villains being something that everyone finds really annoying or frustrating. So that suddenly your post is relatable and you can bring humor into it. Or it could be a hero, like a client who you've took on this amazing transformation, or your own personal transformation, right? So you've got to create that content system. Now, once you've got that, you then need to think, okay, that's a lot of work, first of all, to create all that for an 8-week campaign. How am I going to use AI to help me bring these ideas out? What I would do is think, I have this idea, rough idea, plug that into ChatGPT, Claude, whatever software you use, and then think, what one singular message do I want people to get from this piece of content? It should only ever be one. Put that into your AI tool, and then you need to give it something specific that nobody else can say. So, what are you grounding that message in? You should always start with a unique entry point. An entry point is something specifically unique to you that helps you move towards that core messaging that you want to give. So, you see posts that start with, 6 weeks ago, right? You're anchoring, you're about to say in a real story, time bound, location specific, character set. These are core principles of storytelling, right?
Yeah, like contextual
Exactly.
posts, right? Where they're reading a story and you're taking them to a moment in time. I posted about it today. It was like 9 a.m. We just closed one of the biggest deals. But instead of saying, go me, I just closed a huge big deal, we said, like, here's exactly how it happened.
Yeah.
This is the story. I had a call, I had a conversation, and it's bringing people into that story. And I think when you look at some folks who are maybe earlier in this journey or just starting out creating content, the very natural habit, Shoaib, is always to go to bottom of funnel. I just want to sell. I want to
Mm.
sell aggressively. I want to tell you what I've done. And it's like, no, no, no. Like, you need to think like people don't really give a shit about what you're selling. They care about what you think and what your journey is and why they should trust you. And you got to lead with that. So before we wrap up, Shoaib, because I've loved having you on this podcast and I feel like we need to do it again because we've been talking about it for a while and everyone listening here just got a knowledge bombs from Shoaib. Feel free to DM him for questions on content. He is phenomenal. But before we wrap up, what big bets are you making? Right? You've adjusted your business. You've changed it last year. I saw you evolve as an entrepreneur. I absolutely loved it. I've loved being part of that journey. But what big bets are you making? It's April, 21st right now.
Yep.
What does the next 12 months look like for Shoaib?
Yeah. I'm betting big on owned audience as well. That's thing number one, because as user fees become more saturated, barrier to entry lowers, and more people are able to create content, owned audience is going to be like a key differentiator. The other thing, I think this is like a conflicting one all the time, but I do think video is, people should be going all in on video because that is the ultimate authentic way to communicate a message, right? And then the third one is creating AI driven systems. So not just using AI to create your content, but using AI in the back end to help you source ideas, compile great stories, and also document everything that's going on around you so you can then turn those micro moments of your everyday into content. Those are the three things
Mm.
I'm massively focusing on right now. And then all those come together to be your ecosystem. So no longer am I thinking in terms of I'm going to write a LinkedIn post. What I'm thinking about is what type of ecosystem am I creating and how do I make other people want to be part of my ecosystem rather than this person or that person's.
Before this call, we were chatting a lot about how to get you even more integrated into Limelight's content ecosystem. So everyone listening can probably understand why I brought you on as a fractional head of content. It's been such a joy working with you. Thanks for joining. Where do people find you?
Unsurprisingly, on LinkedIn, Shoaib Ahmed on LinkedIn. Yeah, DM me if you have any questions about content or want to chat personal brand.
All right, let's do it again soon. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Safe Doesn't Scale on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Limelight is the leading AI-powered B2B influencer marketplace and social signals platform. Brands like HubSpot, Webflow, and ZoomInfo use Limelight to power influencer programs at scale. Start your first campaign at limelihq.com.